In just 57 seconds, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors completely destroyed a talk show host on live television. What started as a simple conversation about movies turned into an absolute war zone, with accusations flying, voices raised, and a legendary actor walking off the set after being disrespected in front of millions of viewers. This wasn't just another celebrity disagreement. This was a full-blown explosion that nobody saw coming. Before we dive into this insane story, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the truth behind the fake smiles. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss what we have coming next. Last night on the Tamron Hall show, something went terribly wrong. Samuel L. Jackson, one of the biggest names in entertainment, sat down for what everyone thought would be a fun conversation about his incredible career. But within minutes, the atmosphere in that studio turned ice cold. What viewers at home witnessed was nothing short of shocking, and by the end of it, Samuel L. Jackson was done with the entire show. The trouble started almost immediately. Tamron began the conversation by bringing up Samuel's recent comments about diversity in Hollywood. Now, Samuel has always been outspoken about representation in the film industry, fighting for better roles for black actors, and calling out the system when it fails. But the way Tamron approached this topic was different. There was an edge to her voice, a tone that suggested she wasn't looking for a conversation but rather a confrontation. "Samuel, you've made some pretty strong statements lately about Hollywood," Tamron said, leaning forward in her chair with a tight smile. "Some people are saying you're being too harsh, that things have actually improved quite a bit." Samuel looked at her for a moment, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "Some people? Who are these some people, Tamron?" "Well, you know, critics, other actors, people in the industry," she replied, waving her hand dismissively. "There's a feeling that maybe you're not acknowledging the progress that's been made." "Progress," Samuel repeated, nodding slowly. "Let me tell you about progress, Tamron. Progress isn't casting one or two black actors in major roles and then patting yourself on the back for the next 5 years. Progress is systemic change. It's equal pay, equal opportunities, and not having to fight for scraps at the table." The audience applauded, but Tamron's smile faltered. She shifted in her seat, clearly not expecting Samuel to come back so strongly. But instead of acknowledging his point, she pressed forward with a question that would set everything ablaze. "But Samuel, don't you think that sometimes your approach is a bit too aggressive? I mean, you've called out directors, producers, even fellow actors. Doesn't that burn bridges?" Samuel's jaw tightened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Aggressive? That's an interesting word choice, Tamron. When a black man speaks up about injustice, he's aggressive. When a white man does the same thing, he's passionate. You see the problem with that? I'm just saying that maybe there's a way to communicate your concerns without alienating people who might want to help," Tamron continued, her voice taking on a slightly patronizing tone. "You catch more flies with honey than vinegar." "I'm not trying to catch flies," Samuel shot back, his voice rising slightly. "I'm trying to change an entire damn industry, and I'm not about to tone down my message to make people comfortable." The audience was silent now, sensing the tension building between the two. Tamron's producers could be seen in the background, looking nervous, but she pushed forward anyway. "Okay, but let's talk about your recent movie choices," Tamron said, switching tactics. "You've been in a lot of action films, superhero movies. Some critics say you've sold out, that you're not choosing roles with substance anymore." Samuel stared at her, his expression hardening. "Sold out? Are you serious right now?" "I'm just repeating what some people are saying," Tamron replied with a shrug. "There you go again with some people," Samuel said, his voice dripping with frustration. "Why don't you tell me what you think, Tamron? Or are you just here to throw other people's opinions at me and see what sticks?" Tamron laughed, but it was forced, uncomfortable. "I'm asking questions, Samuel. That's what I do." "No, you're stirring up drama," Samuel countered. "There's a difference between asking genuine questions and trying to create controversy for ratings." "That's not what I'm doing," Tamron insisted. But her voice wavered. "Really? Because it sure feels like it," Samuel said, leaning back in his chair. "You invite me on your show, and instead of having a real conversation about my work, my career, the things I'm passionate about, you want to throw shade and act like I'm the problem. I've been doing this for decades, Tamron. I've seen this game played before. The audience started to murmur, some people nodding in agreement with Samuel, others looking shocked at the confrontation unfolding before them. Tamron's face flushed, and she gripped her note cards tighter. "I think you're being a bit sensitive," she said, and the moment those words left her mouth, everyone in the studio knew she had made a massive mistake. Samuel's eyes narrowed. "Sensitive? Did you just call me sensitive?" "I just meant—" "No, I know what you meant," Samuel interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "A black man stands up for himself, calls out disrespect when he sees it, and he's being sensitive. That's the same tired playbook, Tamron, and honestly, I expected better from you." Tamron tried to recover, holding up her hands. "Samuel, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I have nothing but respect for you and your career." "Then why does every question feel like an attack?" Samuel asked, his frustration boiling over. "Why am I sitting here defending my choices, my activism, my entire existence in this industry? Is that what this interview was supposed to be?" "I'm trying to have a balanced conversation," Tamron insisted. "Balanced?" Samuel laughed bitterly. "There's nothing balanced about this. You came at me from the jump with loaded questions and backhanded comments dressed up as journalism. That's not balanced, Tamron. That's just disrespectful." The studio was completely silent now except for the sound of Samuel's voice, strong and unwavering. Tamron looked flustered, glancing toward her producers, as if hoping they would cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling. "I think we need to take a step back here," Tamron said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Let's talk about something else. Your new project." "I don't want to talk about my new project," Samuel said flatly. "Not like this. Not when you've already set the tone for this whole conversation. You wanted drama, Tamron? Well, congratulations, you got it." "Samuel, please." "No, let me finish," he said, holding up a hand. "I've been in this industry long enough to know when someone is trying to play me. And I'm not about to sit here and let you twist my words or my intentions for your audience. I came here in good faith, ready to have a real conversation. And this is what I get?" Tamron's expression shifted from flustered to defensive. "I don't appreciate you accusing me of having ulterior motives. I'm a professional, and I've been doing this for years." "Then act like it," Samuel shot back without hesitation. "Because right now, you're acting like someone who cares more about viral moments than actual journalism." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. The audience gasped, and Tamron's face went from red to pale in an instant. She set her note cards down on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "That's completely unfair," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I have built my career on integrity and honest conversations." "Then where's the honesty in this conversation?" Samuel challenged. "Because all I'm hearing are gotcha questions and passive-aggressive comments. That's not honest, Tamron. That's calculated." "You know what, Samuel?" Tamron said, her voice rising now to match his energy. "Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle being questioned. You're so used to people kissing your ass that the moment someone challenges you, you fall apart." The audience gasped louder this time, shocked that Tamron had just said that on live television. Samuel's expression didn't change, but there was a fire in his eyes that everyone could see. "Is that what you think this is?" Samuel asked quietly, which was somehow more intimidating than if he had yelled. "You think I can't handle being questioned? Tamron, I've been questioned my entire life. By casting directors who didn't think I looked the part. By producers who didn't think I could carry a film. By critics who said I'd never make it. I've been questioned, doubted, and dismissed more times than you can count. So don't sit there and tell me I can't handle it." "Then why are you getting so defensive?" Tamron pressed. "Because there's a difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful," Samuel explained, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You're not a journalist right now, Tamron. You're a provocateur, and I'm not here for it." Tamron stood up from her chair, her body language becoming more aggressive. "I'm a provocateur? You came on my show and started attacking me." "I responded to your attacks," Samuel corrected, remaining seated but his voice firm. "Every single question you asked was designed to put me on the defensive. That's not my fault. That's yours." "This is ridiculous," Tamron said, shaking her head. "I don't have to sit here and be lectured by you about how to do my job. And I don't have to sit here and be disrespected on your show," Samuel replied, finally standing up from his chair. The audience held their breath, watching as the confrontation reached a breaking point. "No one is disrespecting you, Samuel," Tamron said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Then, what do you call questioning my career choices, my activism, and my character in the span of 10 minutes? What do you call dismissing my legitimate concerns about Hollywood as being too aggressive? What do you call telling me I'm being sensitive when I call you out on your behavior? Tamron didn't have an answer. She stood there, mouth slightly open, searching for words that wouldn't come. That's what I thought, Samuel said, reaching up to remove his microphone. You know what, Tamron? I think we're done here. Wait, you can't just leave, Tamron said, panic flashing across her face as she realized what was happening. Watch me, Samuel replied, tossing his microphone onto the chair behind him. Samuel, sit down, Tamron demanded, her voice taking on an authoritative tone. We're in the middle of a show that you turned into a circus, Samuel said, looking directly at her. I came here to talk about my work, my passion, the things that matter to me. Instead, you wanted to play games. Well, I'm not playing anymore. If you walk off this stage right now, you're proving everything I said about you, Tamron warned, her voice shaking with anger and desperation. Samuel stopped and turned back to face her, his expression one of complete disbelief. Are you seriously trying to manipulate me right now? After everything that just happened, you're trying to guilt me into staying? I'm trying to finish this interview like professionals, Tamron said. No, you're trying to save face, Samuel corrected. Because you know that the moment I walk off this stage, everyone watching is going to see exactly what happened here. They're going to see that you came at me with disrespect. I called you out on it. And instead of apologizing or trying to fix it, you doubled down. That's not what happened, Tamron protested weakly. That's exactly what happened, Samuel said firmly. And you know it. Your audience knows it. Hell, your producers back there know it. He gestured toward the production crew, several of whom quickly looked away. Tamron's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. Fine. If you want to walk off, then walk off. But don't act like you're taking some moral high ground here, Samuel. You came on my show and disrespected me from the start. I disrespected you? Samuel laughed in disbelief. Tamron, I answered your questions honestly. I pushed back when you crossed the line. That's not disrespect. That's called having a backbone. Maybe you're not used to guests who don't just roll over and let you control the narrative. Get out, Tamron said suddenly, pointing toward the exit. Get off my stage. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Samuel raised his eyebrows, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, but there was no humor in it. Oh, so now you're kicking me out? He asked. A second ago you were begging me to stay. I said get out, Tamron repeated, her voice shaking with rage. This is my show, and I want you gone. With pleasure, Samuel said calmly. But let me be clear about something, Tamron. You invited me here. You set this whole thing up. You asked the questions that started this fire. And now that it's burning, you want to kick me out and act like I'm the problem? That's not how this works. I don't care what you think about how this works, Tamron shot back. Get off my stage now, or I'll have security escort you out. Samuel shook his head slowly, looking at her with something that resembled pity. You know what's sad, Tamron? You had a chance here to have a real conversation with me, to talk about important issues, to discuss the work I'm passionate about, to give your audience something meaningful. But instead, you chose this. You chose drama over substance. You chose ego over integrity. And now you're standing there, embarrassed and angry, trying to make me the villain in a situation that you created. Are you done? Tamron asked coldly. Yeah, I'm done, Samuel replied. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with this show. And I'm done with people who don't know how to treat their guests with basic respect. He turned and started walking toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to applaud or remain quiet. Some people started clapping hesitantly, but Tamron's glare shut that down quickly. That's right, walk away, Tamron called after him, unable to help herself. Just like you always do when things get tough. Samuel stopped in his tracks. For a moment, it looked like he might turn back around, might say something else, but instead, he just shook his head and continued walking. The cameras followed him as he made his way through the studio, past the shocked crew members, past the producers who didn't know what to do, and straight out the door. The moment he was gone, Tamron turned back to face her audience, trying desperately to compose herself. Her hands were shaking, her face was still flushed, and her voice cracked when she tried to speak. Well, she said, attempting a laugh that came out as more of a nervous cough. That was certainly unexpected. The audience remained largely silent, A few awkward chuckles scattered throughout, but nothing that resembled genuine support. Tamron looked around, realizing that the room had turned on her. Even her own audience had seen what happened, had watched her push Samuel L. Jackson to his breaking point, and they weren't buying her attempt to brush it off. "Let's take a commercial break," she said quickly, and the cameras finally cut away. But the damage was done. In less than an hour, what had started as a simple talk show appearance had turned into a full-scale disaster. Samuel L. Jackson, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood, had been pushed too far by questions that felt more like attacks than genuine curiosity. And when he called out the behavior, when he stood up for himself and his dignity, he was kicked off the show by a host who couldn't handle being challenged. The entire confrontation had been captured on live television, broadcast to millions of viewers who watched in real time as respect broke down, as professionalism crumbled, and as one of Hollywood's biggest stars walked off a set after being treated with shocking disrespect. This wasn't a planned moment, wasn't a publicity stunt. This was real tension, real anger, and a real breakdown in what should have been a simple conversation. From the moment Tamron started questioning Samuel's approach to activism, calling it aggressive and suggesting he was burning bridges, she set a tone that was less interview and more interrogation. She questioned his movie choices, essentially calling him a sellout. She dismissed his concerns about systemic racism in Hollywood, and when he pushed back, when he defended himself and his career, she accused him of being sensitive and unable to handle criticism. Every step of the way, Samuel remained calm, articulate, and clear about what was happening. He called out the disrespect, named it for what it was, and refused to play along with what he saw as a game designed to create controversy rather than conversation. And for that, for standing up for himself and maintaining his dignity, he was told to get off the stage. The audience had watched it all unfold. They had seen Tamron's questions become increasingly hostile. They had watched Samuel's patient attempts to redirect the conversation. They had witnessed the moment when Tamron called him sensitive, and they had felt the shift in the room when she told him he couldn't handle being questioned. These weren't moments that could be edited out or explained away later. They happened live, in front of everyone. When Samuel removed his microphone and stood up to leave, it wasn't a tantrum or an emotional outburst. It was a measured decision by someone who recognized that the conversation had become toxic and unproductive. He gave Tamron multiple chances to reset, to acknowledge what was happening, to bring things back to a respectful place. But instead of taking those opportunities, she escalated. She demanded he stay, then kicked him out when he said he was leaving anyway. The final moments of the confrontation were perhaps the most telling. As Samuel walked toward the exit, Tamron couldn't resist one last jab, telling him he was walking away from tough situations like he always does. It was a petty, unprofessional comment that only reinforced everything Samuel had said about her approach to the interview. He could have turned around, could have engaged one more time, but instead, he chose to simply leave. His silence more powerful than any words could have been. What viewers witnessed last night wasn't just a disagreement between a host and a guest. It was a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview, how not to treat a guest, and how ego and the desire for drama can completely derail what should have been an enlightening conversation. Samuel L. Jackson came to the show ready to talk about his career, his passion for representation in Hollywood, and his continued commitment to meaningful work in the industry. Instead, he was forced to defend his character, his choices, and his right to speak up about injustice. The most damning aspect of the entire situation was Tamron's inability to recognize what she was doing, even when Samuel explicitly told her that her questions felt like attacks, even when he pointed out the loaded nature of her comments, even when he named the pattern of behavior she was displaying. She refused to acknowledge it. She deflected, she blamed him for being defensive, and she ultimately kicked him out, rather than take any responsibility for how the conversation had deteriorated. This wasn't about Samuel L. Jackson being unable to handle tough questions. This was about a host who confused provocation with journalism, who mistook disrespect for hard-hitting interview style, and who ultimately learned a very public lesson about what happens when you push a legendary actor too far. The cameras captured every moment, every uncomfortable exchange, every escalation that led to Samuel removing his microphone and walking off that stage. The walk-off itself was powerful in its simplicity. No dramatic door slamming, no final shouting match, just a dignified exit by someone who had reached their limit. Samuel L. Jackson has decades of experience in Hollywood, has faced discrimination and disrespect throughout his career, and has always been vocal about calling out behavior that crosses the line. Last night, on the Tamron Hall show, he did exactly that. And when the situation became untenable, when it was clear that no productive conversation could happen, he made the choice to leave. Tamron's attempt to save face after Samuel left fell flat. The audience had seen everything, had watched the entire confrontation build from those first loaded questions to the final demand that he leave her stage. There was no spinning this, no editing it down to make it look different than what it was. The truth was broadcast live to millions of people, and that truth was uncomfortable for Tamron Hall. The silence in the studio after Samuel left spoke volumes. An audience that would normally applaud, cheer, or at least provide some noise, sat quietly, processing what they had just witnessed. They had come expecting entertainment, maybe some laughs and interesting stories about movies. Instead, they got a front row seat to a confrontation that revealed everything wrong with modern talk show culture, where controversy is valued over content, where drama is prioritized over substance, and where respect takes a back seat to ratings. Samuel L. Jackson walked off that stage with his dignity intact, his message clear, and his point proven. He had said that Tamron was more interested in viral moments than actual journalism, and her response to his criticism only confirmed it. He had called out the disrespect, and instead of addressing it, she amplified it by kicking him out. Everything he had accused her of doing, she continued to do right up until he walked out that door. This confrontation will be remembered not just for the drama, but for what it represented. It showed what happens when a host forgets that their job is to facilitate conversation, not to create conflict. It demonstrated the importance of treating guests with respect, regardless of how many hard questions you plan to ask. And it proved that even the biggest stars in Hollywood have limits, that there's a line between tough interview and disrespectful interrogation, and that crossing that line has consequences. Last night, on live television, Samuel L. Jackson drew that line clearly. He called out behavior that was unacceptable, stood his ground when challenged, and ultimately made the decision to walk away from a toxic situation. And Tamron Hall, rather than recognizing the problem and trying to fix it, chose instead to escalate until she was literally telling him to get off her stage. The whole thing played out in real time, with no do-overs, no edits, and no way to pretend it didn't happen. The most powerful moment might have been when Samuel said that Tamron had a chance to have a real conversation, to discuss important issues, to give her audience something meaningful. But she chose drama over substance and ego over integrity. Those words hit hard because they were true, and everyone watching knew it. The opportunity for a great interview was there, but it was squandered in favor of creating controversy. As Samuel walked out of that studio, his footsteps echoing in the silence, he left behind a mess that Tamron Hall would have to deal with. The awkward attempts to continue the show, the shell-shocked audience, the producers scrambling to figure out what to do next. But he also left behind something more important, a clear example of someone standing up for themselves, refusing to be disrespected, and choosing dignity over continuing to participate in something that had become toxic and unproductive. That image of Samuel L. Jackson removing his microphone, standing up, and calmly walking off that stage will be the lasting memory of this confrontation, a powerful statement about knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it for anyone.